so glad that you're here. So without further ado, let's give it up for Phillis Engelbert.
Thanks, Liz.
Oh, sorry, if someone lost the phone.
All right.
And then you can just, yeah, you got it.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. It's really an honor to be here and a pleasure, and thanks to Liz for insisting that she really wanted me to come speak to a room full of very creative people, which is a little humbling. When I heard the theme was revival, the first thing I thought was like a tent and speaking in tongues and all that. But that's not what kind of revival this is going to be. So have no fear. I'm going to talk to you about my personal creative journey, or one piece of my personal creative journey, and then sort of talk more broadly about creativity and why it's needed today and is such an antidote to all of the dark things that can go on. So, in 2010, I was working as a nonprofit administrator. I had been doing a variety of things for over 30 years, from like writing textbooks and reference books to leading peace movements to being a union organizer, working with migrant farm workers in Michigan and in Texas. And then I became a nonprofit administrator in Detroit. And I decided I was just really burned out. And I had never before not had a job. I had always had like big job, like the kind of job that consumes every waking moment and most of the sleeping moments of your life. And I decided just to put it all on pause. And I gave myself 6 months, and I called it my period of creative self-unemployment. And my only goal during that period was to pay attention, to be open to opportunities that came my way, to say yes as often as possible, and to just let life happen, to just do things, not have any plan at all, no regard to the outcome. Nothing had to lead to anything in particular. Just like, be free, just do it. So literally the day after I left my job, I ran into my friend Brian, and he said, "What are you up to these days?" And I said, "Absolutely nothing." And he said, "Well, tomorrow, the Joybox Express is leaving on a bike trip across the state. Why don't you join us?" So, I bicycle, and I've bicycled pretty long distances in the past. And I didn't really know anything about the project, though. He said, "Yeah, here's Mark Braun's phone number. Why don't you call him, tell him you want to come?" So basically, I sold myself to Mr. B, Mark Braun, who's actually pictured here. And that's Brian. And these other musicians, Pete and Carl, and I'm in the back there. And Mark said, "Well, it's just like a small group of us, and we're not really taking people." And I was like, "Oh, you're going to want me, because I can help push that piano bike, and I can do all your press work, and I can make sandwiches and cookies, and I'm just a nice person to have along." And he was like, "Well, okay, I guess so. We'll try it." Anyway, it turned out to be an amazing time. And the group was raising money for children's charities, but they did this thing called joy bombing, where we would just stop somewhere where there was a group of people, pull the cover off the piano, the musicians would bring out their bass and drum kit and guitar and just start performing. And so it was like a great creative way to start my self-unemployment period. And after that, some friends, I got home and friends said, "Hey, we're gonna canoe the boundary waters between Minnesota and Canada. You wanna come?" I was like, "Of course." So we went out and spent a week in the wilderness, nearly capsized in a huge thunderstorm. But anyway, that's what the creative process is all about, right? And then came home, and a friend was running for city council, and her campaign wasn't doing so hot, and she asked if I would help, and I said, "All right, but you have to make me the manager, and you have to do what I say, and we can turn this thing around." So we did, and after about 6-8 weeks, I don't remember, of many, many miles on foot, door to door, we won the race. And then my next door neighbor and close friend my next door neighbor at the time, Joel Panazzo, he and I started cooking together. He was in a similar phase, although 20 years younger, and wanted to just find something. And he's a very creative type. And so we're both vegan, and we started doing food things. Like the first thing we did is we tried to build these window farms, these vertically integrated window farms, hydroponic. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We never made one work. And then we plugged rotting logs with mushroom spores to try to like start a mushroom thing. And we planted a whole bunch of garlic, and we started cooking, and we had dinner parties for our friends, and we had this big adjoining backyard. And so we would create recipes, and we'd go to the market, and we'd buy lots of fresh produce, and we'd whip up these feasts and have friends come over. And it usually started with a trip to a thrift store where we would all try on ridiculous looking clothing and laugh at each other and take pictures. And then we'd come home and we would have feasts. And it was just really great. It was really fun. Big fun dinner parties. And then one of our friends named Lisa Woud, and maybe some of you know her, she owns a floral arrangement shop called Pot and Box. She used to have a spot on Felch Street, or near Felch Street, in the Water Hill area. It's now the Ann Arbor Distillery. But there was a side room, an event space, where she would just let people do things. And she invited us to start having pop-up meals there. So that was fun. So like we would have people come over, and we'd cook these meals at home, and we'd make these big fancy meals, and people would sign up on spreadsheets, and then we would serve it to them on our signature cafeteria-style trays, you know, with all the different little compartments, and each little compartment had a different course on it. And we did those not just at Pot and Box, but we did them at other places. We did one at Work and Tile. We did one at Hathaway's Hideaway, at some large private homes. We did a lesbian New Year's Eve party at a tattoo parlor in Ypsilanti. That's a whole other story you can find out about from me at a different time. And anyway, we're doing these things, and then something was in the paper, and it said there's going to be a new food cart courtyard in downtown Ann Arbor next to downtown Home and Garden called Mark's Carts. Maybe some of you remember it. So the people who had been coming to our pop-up meals were emailing us saying, you got to do this, you got to do this. This is such a natural, this is for you. And Joel and I were very reticent because we were just enjoying this period of just sort of playing with what we were doing, and neither one of us was tethered to any job for a period of time. And I remember it was the day, the applications were due at midnight on a particular day. And around 7 o'clock, I went over to Joel's house, and I said, hey, are we gonna apply? Are we gonna do this? And he said, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure. And I said, well, how about this? Why don't I just whip off some application and, you know, keep the door open. Like, maybe we'll get accepted, maybe we won't. If we get accepted, we can decide if we want to do it or not. And he was like, okay. So I'm a writer, you know, and I pride myself on really like thoughtful, well-worked pieces of writing. Well, I whipped off like the crappiest piece of crap I've ever whipped off in my life. I mean, it was fast, it was like half-hearted, it was ambivalent, and we got accepted. So what we did was, after we were preparing a Valentine's Day pop-up meal, and we're in the kitchen, and I get this email from the guy in charge of the carts. And it's not like, hey, you've been accepted, let us know by X date if you want in. I think the subject line was, here we go. It's like, wait, what? It's like, you know, we're meeting in 3 days. These are the things you need to do. These are the things you need to bring. See you there. And I was like, what? So I told Joel, I'm like, hey, come over here and look at this email. And he did, and he read it. And his reaction was he laid down on the floor, and he pounded his fist. And he yelled some very loud curse words. And that's how our food business got started. So once we decided, all right, we're doing this, we, of course, we had no experience, and we had no money, and we especially had no money after not working for a little while. So we had a Kickstarter campaign and raised about 11.5 grand, which was enough to build a cart. And then we found a flatbed trailer on Craigslist, but it was in Kokomo, Indiana. And it was being sold by someone named Reverend Joseph. And the whole thing was pretty sketchy. But we borrowed a friend's van and we drove to Kokomo and we found this address, which was extremely sketchy. It was like an old warehouse type building, but all the windows were busted out and it didn't look like there was an entrance anywhere. And we walked around the block, we found the entrance, we went in, it seemed pretty abandoned, and there was like all these old hearses in there. And there was a gigantic paper mache Godzilla head. I kid you not. It turned out it was a powder coating factory of some sort. And there was water all over the floors. And it was dark. So this is totally real. I have pictures, if you don't believe me. So we're sloshing through this place, yelling, hello, hello. Finally, we come into this one room, and there's 4 guys sitting around a card table playing poker. And we see this flatbed trailer with one wall built on it, one wooden wall in the corner in like a foot of water. And we tell them who we are, and this guy says, oh yeah, my name is Danny Boy. I'm Reverend Joseph's representative. He's in the hospital. He had to get a limb amputated. I'm like, okay. So the tires were flat on the car. I know this is getting kind of involved. I'll speed it along. But anyway, the tires were flat. It took them a while to finish their poker game. Eventually, they got around to filling the tires. Pulling this cart out, this trailer out of the pond in the corner, and we brought it home. And with the help of friends, over several weekends in February, March, early April, we built this cart. Whole families would come, and I made big pots of chili and cases of beer and big batches of cornbread. And we built it on our next door neighbor's garage next to Joel because they had a huge, they had a tree trimming business. So they had a huge building that we could store it in when we weren't working on it. Anyway, a lot of love and a lot of labor went into building this little food cart. And that's how we got started in the food business. But even from the start at the carts, so this is what the cart looked like at the very beginning, but pretty soon it was surrounded by pots of herbs and flowers. We put speakers on the outside. We built a rooftop deck. We had AstroTurf up there and patio furniture. And when somebody was celebrating something, an anniversary or graduation or whatever, we'd let them go up to the rooftop deck. We'd make them a little cocktail. We had an illicit bottle of Flor de Caña rum and some limeade in the cart. And so, there was always music coming out of the cart, flowers exploding from it. And we coordinated a weekly Friday night music series in the courtyard itself so that it just became sort of a joyous place. All right, now I am totally lost in what I was going to be talking about. Okay, then after 2 seasons in the food cart, we moved on to our first brick and mortar restaurant, the Lunchroom. So the Lunchroom was sort of a culmination of a lot of things that we had been putting together during this creative journey. And the food business that has developed from this would not have ever come about, at least not in the way it did, without that period of time of just letting life happen, not having an agenda. It's such a powerful thing. I could use another period like that now, honestly. But if you put something out into the universe without expecting anything in particular to come back to you, it's different than if you're expecting something. If you do something for a given result, it's different than just doing it for the sake of doing it, to see what happens. I feel like so many of us, our first thing is to say no. Somebody says, hey, let's go on a trip somewhere. You say, no, I don't have time. Oh, come on, let's go see the show. I don't have time. Let's just go out and explore. I don't have time. What if you actually made yourself have time and made all that stuff your priority? And it led, you can see how tired we are maybe in that picture. By the time we finally got open, it led to this was also, I'm skipping over the whole build out of this place, which was that's a whole other chapter. I mean, when we moved into that space, it looked like it had been bombed. There was nothing in it. The walls were bare. There was one hanging light bulb. I mean, it looked a little bit like that powder coating place. Honestly, there had been a Japanese restaurant in this space for decades. All the systems had to be upgraded. The electrical was ripped out. The plumbing was ripped out. There was like a big trench in the middle of the dining room floor where the sewer line had to be reconnected. And for God knows what reason, we signed a lease and we started building it with the help of friends and with the help of some young architects who are now big shots in a wonderful firm called Synecdoche. At that point, they were fresh out of grad school. And we took on like 6 months of backbreaking work. Anyway, we got the food, we got our business up and running. And once we were set up in this space, we could, again, return our attentions to things like building community and creating beautiful spaces and social justice and music. And we even had little duos in that little space all throughout. Like even in our pop-up meals, we would always have little combos, jazz combos, whatever. There was always live music in whatever we did. So the journey continued. After just a little over a year of being open with the lunchroom, we opened the lunchroom, bakery, and cafe, mainly because we didn't have enough room to bake our breads and baked goods without the cooks and the bakers getting into fights all the time. At the lunchroom, this space is currently rocking. In fact, I think we're going to go visit that after this event today. It's kind of taken on a life of its own over in the north side of Ann Arbor. And then what's become our flagship restaurant, Detroit Street Filling Station, opened in 2017. Unfortunately, the first lunchroom has closed. I'll get back to that. But in Detroit Street Filling Station, I mean, I think you can tell from this picture, it's sort of an explosion. And we're kind of known for lots of flowers, lots of plants, because plants make people happy, and flowers are pretty. And pretty and happy spaces make us feel calm and make us feel like you can breathe again and give people a little bit of respite from what might be, you know, a hectic, crazy day and life. And again, this place was also community, but all of our places have been community financed in some ways. We pre-sold food. We did these things called meal plans to finance the build out of both the lunchroom and Detroit Street Filling Station, where people would prepay basically for gift cards, a lot of whom never use them. I think we still have like $100,000 plus in unredeemed gift cards, but they're really from the build outs of our two places. But it also gives people a stake in the place, you know, and people have put their imprint on all of our restaurants in various ways by donating works of art. I mean, I have one of Larry Nissen's glass-blown flowers at North Star Lounge, and various ones of our staff, of our employees and friends have painted murals, have, you know, donated paintings and performed there and that kind of thing. So Detroit Street Filling Station is sort of a culmination of all the things that were being channeled during the 6 months of creative self-unemployment. And then, during the pandemic, we closed the original lunchroom and we opened the space next door to Detroit Street Filling Station, which is North Star Lounge. Some of you have been there. We always were cramming musicians into whatever nook and cranny we had, and inspired by trips to New Orleans and the vibe there, you know, the music, the culture, the plants. I don't know how many of you have ever gone to New Orleans and maybe poked around in some of the courtyards. You walk into a little art shop and you walk through to the back, and all of a sudden it opens up and you're in this little brick-walled space with, you know, no roof, and there's plants and there's art, and it's really, and often there's a fountain, and maybe there's a Buddha statue and some lotuses, and, you know, it forms a very peaceful kind of place to be. And that was the idea behind North Star Lounge. And it was supposed to look a little bit more like a New Orleans courtyard before it turned all cactus themed. But that's because I asked a friend who does metal work if he could make us metal plant sculptures to go on the wall that wouldn't get any sunlight. And he said, well, that sounds hard. I think I can do saguaro. I'm like, okay, it'll be a cactus room. So that's what happened there. I'm not really using notes, but there was something I wrote down that I wanted to say here. So North Star Lounge, the name is inspired by Harriet Tubman, who is my favorite activist ever of all times. And there's a portrait of her that hangs on the first floor, painted by a local artist, Sam Nadon Nichols, who's done a whole civil rights series. But at North Star Lounge, we have queer nights, we have drag shows, open mics. It's become a pipeline for budding musicians. It's a place where anybody can get up and perform at an open mic. And then from there, the next step is to perform at a happy hour. And then from there, the next step is to get booked for a regular paying gig. So there's a huge community of musicians that's formed around the place. And when you look around and see, and if you read the news, listen to the news, whatever, you're hearing some pretty dismal stuff about, what's being taken away from people, and kind of a dark picture of what our society could look like. But when you look at what's happening at a place like North Star Lounge, you see the best in humanity. And when I look around this room at all of you people doing creative things, I see, okay, this is what we have to offer as human beings. Like, we don't have to be cruel to each other. We don't have to be greedy. We don't have to want all the money. We don't have to want all the power. We don't have to oppress people. We don't have to have wars. We can create things, right? We can make a much more beautiful place. And that's kind of the spirit behind North Star Lounge. So shifting gears just a little bit, this is kind of inspired by now, but not just now, because there's been things to protest for a really long time. Like, things are really pretty friggin' fever pitch now, but there's always been stuff. And my thing is, and there's a lot of protests happening. And this is an example of something that just kind of exploded out of me one day during Trump won, and I put it up there, and it became it got more likes than any other social media post ever, and people would take selfies in front of it, and it became kind of a big deal. But protest alone is never enough. It needs to be paired with, what do we have to offer instead? What does an alternative look like? And that's kind of where we all come in order to, to create the world that we want to see. So this next slide that I'm going to put up here. Oh, and this is more examples of, this is Trump 2 protest. So this is what is currently, these are two different banners hung from the awning at North Star Lounge. And I'm sorry, at Detroit Street Filling Station. This slide, which was beautifully crafted for me by Ryan Montelibano, sitting right here, who is the creative genius behind the graphic design work happening at Detroit Street Filling Station at North Star Lounge. That's just something, I had done a little hand-scrawled thing of that years and years ago, and it was just taped up above my desk, because I always want to keep in mind, well, what is it? What is the good stuff? What is the good stuff in life? What is life really about, Why are we here? All the big questions, and you know how the physicists are always trying to come up with this grand unified theory. Well, I decided to adopt that grandiose vision. And so I named my little pictures the Grand Unified Theory. But these are things that I want to see. These are things that make me happy. I think these are things that make other people happy. So what would your wheel look like? It's just something I would put out there to you. All right. The next thing I wanted to say is that creativity is for everyone. It's not just for people who are good at art, who are good at music. You don't have to be world class at anything to just do it. It's what makes us human. But I think a lot of us, it's drummed into us from a young age. Oh, you don't have a good voice, you really shouldn't sing. Like you can't really draw very good pictures, quit trying to draw. But I think everybody should. And this is an example. So we have murals outside of North Star Lounge and Detroit Street Filling Station, this is the one good thing that's come out of the construction behemoth that's gone up next door to us, is that there was construction walls put up, and they were just wooden walls, and we saw them as blank slates. So we decided to make murals. We created something on the computer and then put it on a screen, and at night just projected it on the blank wood, and then started painting it. And people would wander by, and we would just put a paintbrush in their hand, and they'd get in there and paint some stars, or they would paint the outline of something, or they would paint something in. This tall pole, that's mine. I did that during the pandemic. It was, I don't know, maybe 18, 20 feet tall. It was the stump of a tree that had died in our backyard. And when we got the tree taken down, I said, leave a really tall stump. And then as a way to survive the pandemic, I would just get out there whenever I could and paint it. And it felt really good, And I think for everybody, getting involved, getting creative, just helps people feel better. So then the final slide I have is about getting back to the theme of this month's presentation, of this month's meeting, revival. What does that mean? Reawakening, and I really like the second definition, bringing back from a depressed, inactive, or unused state. So that's what North Star Patio looks like today. And let's get out there, do it ourselves, have the courage to just say yes and to pay close attention to what's around us and encourage others to do that too. All right, that's all I got. Thanks.